Hey, peace and blessings. It's your brother Sorry back with yet another one. As always, peace to the ancestors. You know what I mean? Always, giving thanks to them for their contributions and, them being the shoulders that we pretty much stand on. It allows us to even make material like this. Peace to the true and living. Yeah, I mean, who is the true and living? If you've been tuned into any of these various playlists, various videos, various series, man, um, you must be the true and living. And when we use that terminology and everything like that, you know what I mean? Um, we just bear witness that the architecture contains the fingerprint of the architect. You see what I'm saying? Um, so this is gonna be an interesting piece for you today. You see what I'm saying? This is going to be either illustrated, volume 13. And we're up to 13 at this point. Either illustrated, issue number 13, the Bio-Aetheric Engineering of Genocide. Now, I know we've been kind of, going into those little dark corners and stuff like that. We did the Bio-Aetheric Engineering of Homicide. We're doing the Bio-Aetheric Engineering of Genocide, and we're gonna do the bioetheric engineering of suicide. Go ahead and get all that up out the way. Um, Reason why we're doing it. A video we did a long time ago. We were examining basically the cycle that we're in. We've already talked about the whole notion of this being what's commonly referred to as Kali Yuga, or a time of great turmoil. If you also look up something called Pluto in Aquarius. That's about a 15-year span. You see what I'm saying? That talks about, you see what I'm saying, some of the events, some of the Aquarius deals with revolution and change and government and all that stuff like that, or whatever. Pluto deals with transformation or what have you. So it's going to be a lot of that, revolutions all over the planet, as we can see. Um, um, on a previous video, we kind of went into um, the Saturn, if I'm not mistaken, Saturn Pluto conjunction of 2020. You see what I'm saying? Um, that was around the time of COVID. You see what I'm saying? And from an astrological perspective, when we measure these cycles and everything like that, one way of measuring the cycles um, is you could take when the planets are together, as in what happened in 2020, and then over time they separate. You see what I'm saying? And you form your various aspects, sextiles, squares, trines, the various different degrees of separation and everything like that. They form opposition when it's 180 degrees, and it goes back around to um, ultimately to that conjunction, or 0 degrees. Both of the planets are at 0 degrees and everything like that. That constitutes a particular cycle of two planets and everything like that that may line up in conjunction and everything like that. Um, the particular conjunction I'm talking about happened January 2020. You see what I'm saying? That don't end till, if I'm not mistaken, I, I think the opposition is 2036 or something like that. You see what I'm saying? So we're in numerous cycles, and all of those cycles, a lot of they deal with change. You see what I'm saying? Turmoil and turbulence on the planet and everything like that. Everything that we're going through now. You see what I'm saying? So with that being said, there's a lot of I don't know, coups and violence all over the planet and everything like that. So I don't say that to scare anybody or anything like that, because things like this, these are all cycles. There's no from the philosophy that I um, am a proponent of. There's no such thing as the end of the world. We're dealing with cycles, and more appropriately spirals. You see what I'm saying? Um, So there is no end. It just transforms into something new and something different, or whatever case may be. So don't fear the end of the world. You got, you got people trying to bring about certain biblical prophecies and stuff like that, and unfortunately for us, they have the money and the clout to do that. So At best, we just know what's going on and kind of transition accordingly. Um, but yeah, we're gonna get into the whole idea of um, the bioetheric engineering of genocide. You see what I'm saying? We're gonna go. We did the bioetheric engineering of homicide. You see what I'm saying? So what does that look like on a massive scale and everything like that? And it's not anything that we're kind of dwelling upon. We're trying to kind of understand what are the implications for that, as far as the people involved, as far as the place involved, the land. Because remember, we said the energy is captured in the in the place. You see what I'm saying? It captures the energy or the trauma of whatever happens to the people or whatever. So just to kind of get an idea about this or whatever, and as we always do, we do different case studies on different scenarios to kind of make a little bit more sense or whatever. So um, as we always do in attempt to hold down this section of the internet, with no further ado, I present to you with Ether Illustrated, issue number 13, Bio-Aetheric Engineering the Genocide. Let's get it. All right, so let's get into this a little bit. All right. So we're still going to be using the same framework that we kind of been using. We're relying on Tesla's physics because, like we said, Tesla's physics is more applicable to esoteric phenomena. We're relying on the idea of the body being electric, not really so much an idea. It's just something that's not really, I'll say they're still in the process of making the transition from the more chemical based model of medicine and everything to the more energetic model of medicine. So they have disciplines like electro electromagnet. It's a whole discipline that deals with the body having an electromagnetic field or the human biofield. So all of this is medical terminology. We've been dealing with Robert Becker's stuff as far as the body electrical, the body being electrical and everything like that. Dealing with let me see, Carl Jung, a causal connections, not A plus B equals C, but I thought about Sally and she called me, I always use that as a simple example of a causal circumstances and everything like that. But that's just a real quick example and everything like that. But that's kind of what the framework that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the idea of the bioetheric feedback loop. Now, in simple terms, it's saying that there's a feedback loop from the soul or the blueprint, but what we commonly call the soul, to the human flesh and blood being. So basically, in other words, what I'm telling you is that God talks to you all the time, unceasingly, but God does not speak English, Spanish, Portuguese, French. God don't speak none of them languages. Arabic, none of that. God don't speak none of those languages or whatever. God communicates in situations and circumstances similar in a similar way in which you would interpret a dream. So that's kind of the level of communication. The reason why we, you see what I'm saying, we're expecting some sort of human linguistic communication, and that's not really how nature at large communicates or whatever case may be. So and again, I'm just laying down the foundation. All of this is coming out of or inspired by self to self material. Self to self material is inspired by the experiential, and its basis is symbols, patterns, and principles. And if you're interested in a lot more of that material, that's more in the self to self playlist or whatever. This would qualify as like others to self. So this is where all this scientific jargon comes in or whatever case may be. So uh if there's a feedback loop from the individual soul to the person having the experience or whatever, every time you lock your keys in your car, every time, you know what I'm saying, something favorable happens to you, you get a raise on your job, every time, excuse me, it's something that happens, somebody cuts you off in traffic, there's a meaning to that. It means something or whatever. There's a discernible message from that. We have a playlist in the making. It's called the Ether Demonstrated, where we're gonna be doing waking dream interpretations and all that stuff like that, and kind of demonstrating what we're talking about here. But basically, there's a feedback loop from the individual soul to the um, individual having the experience. Likewise, there is a feedback loop from the collective, as it were, whether that be a community, an ethnic group, a tribe, a country, a county, a city, whatever. Um, the collective group or what have you has a etheric blueprint, as it were, and everything like that. And the actions of the group has what we call some sort of feedback or karma associated with it, or whatever case may be. So what we were talking about in the bioetheric engineering of homicide, pretty much when somebody goes out here and just takes somebody out in a whim or something like that, somebody just takes somebody out or what have you out of malicious intent or something like that or whatever, what is that really doing? You see what I'm saying? Like we talked about, that's basically creating a shared traumatic event between you and whoever you just took up out of here. You interrupted their death process. They're kind of bound to you. We kind of cross-reference that with the idea of necromancy and stuff like that. In certain iterations of necromancy and everything like that, they use an artifact. They're not even the person that's killing the person or unaliving the person or what have you. The person might already have been unalived or whatever, and they're just taking the remnant of that person's remains and to have access to that person's residual energy field in order to get them to do something for them and everything like that. They're bound through some manner of artifact. When you unalive somebody or whatever, you didn't consider none of that. You don't have no artifact. You don't have nothing but yourself that that person is bound to. That's why you kind of see the person and everything like that. And from a certain perspective, that person could be out to get you from beyond the grave, as it were. So all of that considered or what have you, go back and check out the video about Bio-Aetheric engineering of homicide. It kind of gets into all that. When we take that on a larger scale and we talk about um, genocide of a people. You see what I'm saying? We talked about a person committing homicide and that person being the deceased person being bound to their unaliver. You see what I'm saying? How does that work when it's a ethnic cleansing or it's a group of people being unalived over a large scale? You see what I'm saying? So let's take a look at that. Genocide in this framework is the maximal systemic application of the bioetheric engineering. It is not merely mass killing, but the deliberate, large scale, and permanent disruption of a population's collective energy field. So, like how we talked about just now, um, groups have a collective energy field, or there's a collective blueprint, or what have you, that gives them like a common thread that binds them energetically as a group and everything like that. So let's see here. It's a disruption of the population's collective energy fields designed to create a state of profound spiritual imbalance and energetic exploitation. Let's keep going. Okay, so mass death and the creation of the homeless dead. Okay, so this is something that comes we get into like voodoo and stuff like that. You get into concepts like the bombo state or the homeless dead and everything like that. A person is wandering. They don't have access to their death process has been interrupted in some way or what have you, and they're bound to the physical realm. They can't finish their death process and go where they need to go to find closure in that or whatever case may be. They're kind of like a disembodied spirit or whatever. Okay, what does that look like as far as a genocide event? And again, we're going to go over a few case studies so we see what we're talking about in real time, in real life. Okay, so in African traditional religions like Palo, Ifa, um, Santeria, Voodoo, the manner of death is critical to to the spirit's transition. A peaceful death facilitates the spirit's journey to the realm of the ancestors, Igbo and Babalawoe, if I'm saying that right. Genocide as spiritual catastrophe, a traumatic, violent mass death. Genocide is a spiritual catastrophe. Okay, it's likening this into a spiritual catastrophe. The sheer volume of simultaneously highly charged and unresolved deaths prevents the typical transition of the electric soul. Okay, we arrive at the idea of the electric soul. Pascal Beverly Randolph was the first person in modern time to kind of propose that that the soul is a electrical phenomenon. We're just taking it a step further with Tesla's physics to kind of flesh that out. So let's kind of go back over that. The sheer volume of simultaneously highly charged and unresolved deaths prevent. Okay, unresolved deaths. Okay, a person isn't, because remember we said in the previous video that when we liken the body to a battery, right? And the person's, for lack of a better way, spirit or aura or human biofield as a field that's coupled to this battery and everything like that. The death process is the decoupling of the um, field from the battery and everything like that. The battery decomposes and the field decouples. Upon decoupling and everything like that, it has the nature to fragment, because remember when we were talking about the circle of space, matter, and time, we were talking about on the top half of the circle things are formed. We live in the world of form. On the bottom half of the circle is where all the energy goes, or what have you, once it's used up and everything like that, and it tears things apart. You see what I'm saying? On the bottom half of the circle and everything like that. So the from based on what we've kind of explored from our case studies, as far as, let's say, like Tibetan Buddhism and things of that nature, and they talk about the Bardo states and everything like that. Um, when the person is deceased and everything like that, the space that they're pretty much in, it rips things apart. You see what I'm saying? It's harder for them to maintain their continuity. So us having funerals for them, us doing things for them on the living side or whatever, it helps the deceased person maintain their continuity after death. So that's kind of like a little recap on what we talked about in the previous, on one of the previous videos. Um, so the volume of simultaneously highly charged and unresolved deaths, unresolved, like what we talked about, prevents a typical transition of the electric soul. So you're basically interrupting the death process of a massive amount of people, or what have you. Okay, the bombo state and the homeless dead. The bombo state refers to a spirit that is lost, wandering, and energetically bound to the circumstances of its traumatic death, unable to fully decouple from the earth's plane. Genocide creates an army of the homeless dead, millions of souls thrown into this bombo state. Okay, so okay, so you're basically, when this happens or what have you, you're creating a, I don't know, as it described it, an army of homeless dead, right? Basically, it creates a large population of the homeless dead simultaneously or whatever. Okay, let's see here. The implications: these spirits are not malicious, but are energetically distressed. They're not malicious necessarily, but energetically distressed, lacking the ancestral rites, no funerals or anything like that, or proper closure required for stability. So they're subject to be fragmented. They create a massive, chaotic, high frequency, energetic field that blankets the affected land. So remember how we said that various things that happen in a place or what have you. We were going into Ernest Hartman is geobiology and everything like that. And he was talking about how different places have different qualities of energy, and the things that happen in those places will affect the quality of energy of that place. So genocide and the bioetheric feedback loop. The established uh, the loop established in, one second. All right, so we're gonna take a little bit of a detour, and we're gonna get into the homeless dead thing. Before we get too far into all this, we're gonna get into the homeless dead thing. Okay, the concept of homeless dead refers to a soul that, for various reasons, failed to complete its spiritual journey to the ancestral realm. Right? Um, They are left in the earthly or physical realm, often in states of confusion, distress, or fragmentation, like how what we just said. Now, this is coming out of traditions like Palo and Vodun and Ifa, just different traditions, and the Kumi, all that. It's coming out of various different traditions of that nature, and kind of um, in the ballpark of their take on that. Um, Fragmentation. What happens after the deceased person is fragmented? In many Afro-diasporic cosmologies, the soul is not a single entity, but is composed of several principles or parts of the soul, like what we talked about in the Book of the Dead, as far as the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Various different frameworks would suggest that the soul has various different parts to it, and even after death, it tends to fragment a bit. Okay, death is a process where these principles separate, with some returning to God and others remaining to become the ancestor, right? Let's see here. Uh, okay, so uh, yeah, okay, so it has a breakdown from the various different traditions. Let me see here. Yeah, it has a breakdown from the various different traditions and everything like that. What happens as far as the soul, like in Voodoo and Haitian Voodoo and T-Bone, consciousness, personality, memory must be captured and settled by the family rituals, like the illicit ceremony, and after death, fragmentation occurs if this part is captured by a sorcerer of Bokor instead of the ancestors, creating a zombie, spiritless, body captured spirit or a chaotic, distressed entity, or whatever case may be. So, similar to what we talked about in the Bio-Aetheric engineering and necromancy and stuff like that, it's talking about kind of the things that can befall the deceased person. The spirit is unable to cross the. Okay, so this is coming out of Paulo. This next what happens to the fragmented part of the person. In the Apollo understanding, the spirit is unable to cross the cosmic river and remains as an Nfumbi, deceased one. If the death was violent, sudden, or the individual is wicked, the Nfumbi can be unstable. A Palero may bind this spirit into a ritual vessel to be worked uh, or used for service. A fragmented Nfumbi is often chaotic and desperate. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so when you get into Ifa and Lukumi, you dealing with the Ori. Let's see here. Let's see, returns to the divine source. Fragmentation or a chaotic death leaves the Ori a corrupted or lost consciousness, bound to the physical realm, often unable to properly become an ancestor. They linger in distress. So these are some of the implications of some of this fragmentation that we're talking about. So we're going to be talking about this on a large scale when this happens, because again, we're living in a time where there are going to be many revolutions and armed conflicts all over the planet over probably over the next 15 years or so, or whatever, depending. I mean, I'm not trying to guarantee that, but I'm just based on how it's looking. Um, After fragmentation, the homeless dead are essentially hungry, confused, and stuck outside of the natural cycle of death and rebirth. You've interrupted their death cycle. They are essentially manipulated, preyed upon by malevolent spirits, or harnessed by sorcerers for negative work because they lack the necessary spiritual integrity and protection of the ancestral realm. So again, the actions of the living can give them that extra continuity that they need to kind of stay together and everything like that and do what they need to do in the afterlife. Okay, so implications of being bound to the physical realm after death. Okay, so remember we said in the situation of genocide, you have a bunch of people bound like this. Okay, a spirit that is bound to the physical realm instead of transitioning has several significant implications for themselves and the living. Spiritual stagnation. The spirit cannot evolve, heal from its life's trauma, or join the collective wisdom of the ancestors. Notice how that's a recurring thing, the ancestors. Okay, they are stuck reliving the circumstances of their death or their life's lowest point, right? I'm trying to recall. It's a movie like that with a deceased person. If I'm not, I don't want to say the wrong movie, maybe Ghost or something like that. But it's an old movie where they it's a similar thing. Um, because based on what he's saying, the deceased person could be reliving their life or whatever case may be, or reliving moments in their life or whatever, and they might not even realize that they're dead. You see what I'm saying? That's the thing. Okay, so etheric contamination. Their distress, chaos, and frustration act as a spiritual pollutant, weakening the veil between the worlds. This can cause persistent low grade misfortune acausal stuff, mental illness, nightmares, and chronic instability for the surviving family members or for people living in the area where they died. Okay, so again, the area, the physical land or what have you, where the situation happened or whatever, it can be how people would normally say, oh, it's haunted or something like that. There, as we can see, there's potential credence for that. Um, yeah, it could, through these acausal connections, a la Carl Jung and Wolfgang Pauli, we understand that it doesn't have to be a plus B equals C type thing or whatever case may be. And through these conversations and case studies, we also understand that that would be a viable way that the deceased would communicate with the living. They don't have a body to pick up this lighter and float it around. You see what I'm saying? They have to function from an acausal perspective or whatever. That would be how we would receive it on the physical side or whatever. So it's interesting. Okay, let's move right along. Vulnerability to possession, manipulation. Being homeless means they are spiritually unguarded. Spiritually unguarded. Nobody's claimed them. They haven't had they haven't received their last rites or whatever case may be. They can't take their position with the ancestors. They can be co-opted or even mentally absorbed by the more powerful malevolent energies, or deliberately controlled by a person through ritual work. All right. So that's kind of the implications of a person. I don't know, the implications of being bound to the physical realm. So, let's say, okay, so this is going to go into still moving in the direction of the bioetheric engineering of genocide. I just wanted to kind of like recap a little bit over the traditional unaliving thing, or what the deceased person goes through or what have you. This stuff isn't designed to be, doom and gloom type deal or what have you, but death is something that we deal with. Our connection to the ancestors is something that we deal with. Our issues and things that we have to work out in with our own family members and things of that nature. Our interactions with people, we're all human beings or whatever. We have different things going on or whatever case may be. This kind of maybe the intention is to I don't know, the implications of some of this or what have you, as far as our connection to the ancestors, what happens when a person is deceased, the weight and gravity of karma and all that in some of these conversations is designed to kind of give us a more mature perspective, or a different lens to kind of see certain things in life. It's not designed to convert you to or away from nothing. As I always say, excuse me, it's designed. Excuse me, it's designed. Man, yeah, it's designed to give you a slightly different perspective. So, moving right along, comparative bioetheric engineering, war versus genocide. All right, so we're gonna go into the difference. The energetic architecture of mass death differs based on intent of the operator, the state, or the leader. So, a war versus a genocide. If it's a genocide, we kind of it kind of speaks for itself to an extent, as far as what we're dealing with as far as the intent is concerned. A war, that's more of a mixed bag. So let's kind of get into it. War, particularly ritualized warfare seen across various tribal and societal structures, often functions as a societal mechanism for high voltage energetic discharge. Intention. The underlying psychosocial intent of conventional war is often defined as conflict resolution, the display of courage, or the ritualistic cleansing of the accumulated sins of the guilt of the people. It is a system seeking to return to a prior stable state by externalizing internal anxiety and debt. So when we get more into that, like when we get into the bioetheric governance and all that stuff like that, and how the priesthood, or in our case, our lawmakers, or the people who write the laws or whatever, are really a priesthood who kind of modulate the karma of a society and stuff like that. The war would be also an input into the feedback loop, or some sort of way to offset the like a discharge or a release for the trauma of the people in the society, however it may go. Um, and we're gonna get into that. We're gonna have more detailed conversations about that, how that functions on the societal level. Okay, so energetic engineering, the large-scale military expenditure required for war requires results in a massive expenditure of energy, accounting for an estimated 5.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. This energy uses alongside the environmental damage, oil spills, pollutants, heavy metals, is a physical manifestation of the system's massive discharge expenditure. While the violence is high magnitude, the collective intention is often framed the narrative, the story, the lie that we tell ourselves, framed as defending borders or achieving a unifying goal, giving the event a higher, albeit unstable, coherence than pure annihilation. So so that goes into okay, the media. The media is also adjusting the karma of the situation, because the lie that they tell you, if they tell you, hey man, we're going over there to just wipe these people off the map or whatever case may be, you'll feel some kind of way about it, and you may even feel guilty or whatever. But if they tell you a lie or whatever case may be, or tell you some alternative reason hypothetically why they're doing this or that or whatever, and you go for it, um it's a certain strength that you're giving to the collective field of the society or the country or however. You see what I'm saying? This isn't to point fingers at any individual country or anything like that, or even to really get political about anything or whatever. This is a general statement. This is something that's happened all throughout history or whatever, from ancient times to modern. We're just having a good old fashioned case study to kind of, see what we see, dissect it and see what we're looking at, right? So while the violence is high magnitude, the collective intention is often framed. Okay, so that's the power of the narrative. So that just goes to show the power of the narrative as far as on a social level. Because remember we say, remember we said on a individual, excuse me, on an individual level. Yeah, so basically, the media fulfills a lot of this um, function right here. It spins the narrative or whatever, or it affects how you feel about what your countrymen are doing or what have you. So it's funny how we talked about in previous episodes, previous videos, we talked about the ego and everything like that. The ego, will tell you lies to keep you in a particular. The ego does not follow the from a perspective of the experiential. The ego does not follow the agenda of the blueprint or the soul or the principle, as it were. The ego follows its own rules and everything like that. The ego has bought into the materialistic world and everything like that, and the ego will have you on a self-destructive path for 20, 30 years or what have you, just to satisfy its own whims or whatever case may be. You see what I'm saying? So that's the nature of the ego. And it's funny how the media corresponds with an aspect or an expression of the ego of the country or what have you. So that's just an interesting thing. Little nuances we get from this material. Okay, so moving right along, the deceased fatalities are largely contained within the accepted parameters of combat. You see what I'm saying? Um, while traumatic, the death is often framed within a narrative of sacrifice or duty, potentially mitigating the depth of fragmentation and the lingering traumatic binding, right? Potentially mitigating the depth of fragmentation and the lingering traumatic binding, though still producing the bombo state for those who die violently. So you're still making these people homeless, dead, or what have you, but um, the narrative is temporarily absolving the people who kind of have a hand in it, the people you're killing in their name. You see what I'm saying? Oh, we're doing this for the glory of Narnia. I'm just making up a country. You're doing this for the glory of Narnia and everything like that, or we're defending the borders of Narnia or whatever case may be, and you just did XYZ 1 2 3 to this random group of people and everything like that. But the people who live in Narnia or whatever don't feel bad, like they're just bloodthirsty, whatever, because the lie that they've been told it keeps the morale of the country. So temporarily, or what have you, it creates a bubble, similar to how the ego does for the individual. It creates a bubble until the truth comes out in some way, some form. Some journalist or whatever case maybe comes out and say, "Man, y'all did X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3." Oh no, and then it makes you feel it that bubble pops or whatever case may be. So moving right along. So let's go into genocide or ethnic cleansing, targeted annihilation, forced energetic nullification. So when all these conflicts happen in the world or whatever case may be, you see what I'm saying? This is an aspect of what's going on energetically. You see what I'm saying? This is a case study for the mature mind. So, you know, our intention is to make us more knowledgeable about these things, so we don't just do these things haphazardly. The media and different, I don't know, outlets, movies, or what have you, make certain things seem very fair seeming, and the gravity of what you're actually doing, like how we talked about um, sexual intercourse and trauma imprints and things of that nature, or whatever case may be. The electrical difference between a man and a woman, though society would tell women that they're just like a man and they can do everything like a man, energetically, electrically, like what we've been talking about, a woman is not like a man, and it affects her differently. Doing the things that a man does will um burn a woman out faster than it will a man. A man is electrically designed to do the things that a man does. A woman can't do that because her engineering is different. You see what I'm saying? If that makes any sense. So that's the reason why we kind of go into any of this, because while society will make you feel like, oh man, I can just do this, that, and the third, or whatever case may be, and you know when the consequences come down, you know what I'm saying? It's your life. Nobody, you just left to deal with the consequences. So we kind of like trying to do this for the benefit of my young gods, to my young gods, peace to the gods. We're trying to kind of bring a little clarity and a little color into some of these conversations. So let's see here. The deceased, the use of corpses in the torture system and violation of biological time actively destabilizes the spiritual transition. Okay, the malicious intent forces the binding of the shattered. Let's see here. Electrical soul, for the sake of this conversation, fragments to the physical plane and the land. So it binds the soul to the physical plane and to the physical and to the land itself, the place where the trauma happened, ensuring their enslavement or manipulation by dark forces. The death process is actively interrupted, right? So binding the deceased to the physical plane and the perpetrator. Okay, so we talked about the bombo state and everything like that. Okay, so the spiritual consequence of genocide is the trauma binding, right, of the victim's consciousness field. The binding occurs in twofold: the binding to the land, right, and the binding to the perpetrator or the nation that did it, right? So the binding to the land, the low coherence energetic imprint of mass suffering, because you doing low coherence because you got people doing things that they don't want to do. You see what I'm saying? If they wanted to do it, it'll be high coherence. You see what I'm saying? So low coherence energetic imprint of mass suffering is permanently recorded onto the location where the trauma occurs, right? Like Amityville horror. You see what I'm saying? The house. You see what I'm saying? All these stories that we read about. Okay, so the same thing for a battlefield or a place where it's been ethnically cleansed or something of that nature. Consistent with the principle of psychometry, Ernest Hartman's geobiology suggests that intense electromagnetic anomalies on the Earth's grid, Hartman knots, are exacerbated by seismic events and geological faults. A mass trauma event saturating the environment with low coherence energy acts as a high magnitude localized disturbance. High magnitude localized disturbance. It's local to that place or what have you, causing a pervasive negative perturbation in the Earth's natural geomagnetic field. Okay, something else that kind of does this on a kind of different level, but it kind of does something similar to this, is the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. It has a similar effect or what have you. On a different level, but just as this causes a massive negative perturbation in the Earth's energy field, a lot of the stuff that they messing with causes a similar thing. So this creates a massive trauma anchor for the fragmented bombo spirits or whatever. Because when we get into the bioetheric engineering of suicide, we're going to talk about how the person is not necessarily bound to another person. They're bound to the trauma that caused them to take their own life or what have you. See what I'm saying? So that's the thing, being bound to the actual trauma as well. So, okay, so this creates a massive trauma anchor for the fragmented bombo spirits, trapping them in the physical dimension. Okay, so that goes into the effect of the binding onto the land. Now let's go into the effect of the binding to the nation or the perpetrator who did it. The shared traumatic event establishes a profound acausal. Remember, we're not talking about A plus B equals C. Acausal connection, Jungian synchronicity between the victims and the perpetrator nation. This is analogous to the concept of trauma bonding, right? Where fear and violence create an intense, unhealthy bond of dependency and obsession. Wow. The victim's collective consciousness remains linked to the collective psyche of the perpetrator nation or its leader through the unresolved energetic debt, preventing both victims' spiritual ascent and perpetrator's internal peace. This is the mechanism that generates the waking dream projection, a future systematic reflection of the trauma. And again, we're going to get into the damage to the ancestral blueprint and the genetic miasm or what have you. I always say things like this are interesting because when we get into, and that might be a future conversation, when we get into the whole idea again of the whole transatlantic slave trade and stuff like that, as far as Africans being in the diaspora and everything like that, and when we go back and we explore the history of slavery in the Caucasus Mountain Black Sea region and everything like that, that endured thousands of years or what have you, it can almost be surmised that maybe the transatlantic slave trade or a portion of that was a karmatic type situation. Even certain ideas or what have you as black Arabs that called themselves white having red slaves and everything like that, but Europeans in America called themselves white. You see what I'm saying? So that's further evidence of this or whatever case may be. So that's maybe a future conversation or what have you. Again, we having mature conversations. This isn't to offend anybody or whatever, but we just like to call things right down the middle so we can get some clarity on certain things or what have you. So damage to the ancestral blueprint and the genetic miasm. The binding of the deceased to the physical plane is catastrophic for the lineage's energetic integrity. Shared trauma, such as genocide, constitutes a massive input into the ancestral group soul, right? The collective consciousness of the ethnic group facilitated by genetic material, right? All right. So let's get epigenetic damage. Okay. Epigenetic damage. Research suggests that the trauma sensitivity has a heritable basis, and that descendants of trauma survivors, i.e., Holocaust survivors, are statistically more vulnerable to developing PTSD, anxiety, depression, even though they did not experience the trauma directly. So, due to the fact that the connection to the ancestors is through the DNA and everything like that, and we theorize that the DNA was a fractal antenna. You see what I'm saying? That gives you access to the blueprint, as it were. We talked about how the mitochondria DNA does not repair itself like nuclear DNA. Thus, that is a one major reason why we age like how we do and everything like that. Access to the blueprint shows you. That's why you that's why when you're 70, you can't look like you're 25. Your access to the blueprint kind of wanes over time, the degradation of the DNA and everything like that. That's why when we talked about the bioetheric engineering of hoodoo conjure and everything like that, we talked about the blood in the spaghetti and everything like that. The whole idea of blood magic is a thing because of this antenna, this DNA antenna that we're talking about. So This is the physical manifestation of an inherited miasm, a collective energetic distortion or disease pattern that is passed down through the DNA blueprint. So a disease that may be common among a particular group of people might be, well, more than likely is a expression of some aspect of the feedback loop. You see what I'm saying? It's stemming. It's a symbolic representation of some sort of trauma that that group potentially has. Okay, bioetheric feedback loop distortion. The genocide induces a dominant low frequency energetic distortion into the ancestral bioetheric feedback loop. This distortion overrides the natural intended flow of ancestral energy, wisdom, vitality, replacing it with patterns of panic, grief, and creative insecurity. So a genocide on a group of people, it disturbs and distorts the ancestral blueprint of that group of people. You see what I'm saying? The DNA as the physical anchor of the ancestral blueprint becomes a repository of the psychic womb. Like I said, that the people who endure certain hardships or whatever is carried in their DNA or whatever the case may be. So that hurts the overall ancestral blueprint. So the new people that are being born into that genetic pool or whatever, they're going to share that trauma. So the blueprint is going to distribute that trauma to them or whatever. It's all a feedback loop, as we've been talking about for the better part of 7 years now. Peace to the true and living. Peace to all the non-believers, man. Um, Healing requires a conscious process of energetic retrieval to reclaim the scattered fragments. So that's an interesting thing. Let's see here. Let's say, let's get into some case studies real quick. Get into some case studies. Okay, so the following case studies illustrate the principles of the destructive bioetheric feedback loop in the creation of a mass homeless dead for geopolitical or economic ends. Okay, so we talked about the war thing. Basically, pretty much the main difference between a war and a genocide is the narrative. You see what I'm saying? When you have a war, allegedly we're going to war for a good reason, and the media is going to try to spin it or project that. You see what I'm saying? That's why they take so much, they spend so much energy and money to make us believe a certain thing or whatever case may be, because our participation counts. Our participation means something to the overall field and the overall energy of what's going on or whatever case may be. Okay, so this was the foundational act of modern energetic. Okay, excuse me, the scramble for Africa in King Leopold's Congo genocide. So we're going to go into something. This happened after the Berlin Conference of 1884. So this is common knowledge, just a historical event. Um, the Congo genocide upon the King Leopold, near 1884. I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head or what have you, but uh, King Leopold of Belgium, in the scramble for Africa, they basically, the European powers, after they uh, basically defeated the last remnants of the Moors or what have you out of North Africa and everything like that. They sought to divide up Africa into various different pieces or what have you, and that's why even to this day Africans in various parts or what have you speak various different European languages or what have you. So um, King Leopold is notable because he was one of the individuals that conquered the Congo and everything like that, or his piece was the Congo, or Belgium's piece was the Congo and everything like that. And just Google King Leopold. I'm not gonna bog this video down with the details of the story or whatever, but he committed a massive genocide in the Congo region of Africa. So let's kind of get into that for educational purposes. You see what I'm saying? This was the foundational act of modern economic genocide in Africa, creating an intentional bioetheric collapse to enable resource extraction. Okay, the engineering. King Leopold's regime was dedicated to the literal amputation, hands, they amputated the hands of the people, and murder of millions to enforce rubber and ivory quotas. So this is millions of people being unalive. So everything we talked about previous to this, just apply it to this case study. This is millions of people, Okay, this act was not random. It was systematic, cold and calculated, and ideal engineering process. Bioetheric implications of that. Okay, the sheer volume of trauma-bound energy, the bumbo state of millions of mutilated spirits, violently charged the land. Right. So this is still the case today, as far as the energetic situation with that particular place we're talking about. This massive energetic rupture created a spiritual vacuum that allowed for the continued, relatively unchallenged exploitation of the Congo's mineral wealth. The chaos and instability seen in the region today are interpreted as the persistent collective high frequency resonance of the original catastrophic homeless dead energy field or what have you. So basically, a lot of the help that they probably had from that other side, um, they when that was done, that harmed the blueprint. Something terrible. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of the help or the stability of the ancestral blueprint was probably damaged heavily in that event or whatever. So much so that even to this day that the people have not recovered from that. You see, or the descendants of those people have not fully recovered. Um, Feedback loop. The descendants of the perpetrators, AG Western global markets, continue to benefit from the mineral wealth, while the descendants of the victims are caught in continuous chaotic field generated by unresolved trauma. Okay, so that's going into that. Okay, so and again, as far as the perpetrator is concerned, it's always a bubble for the perpetrator because whenever something is done like this, it's a coercive act. It's a coercive act or what have you. So it's a lot of negative blowback from that. They have to keep doing things in order to offset that energy, and it ultimately creates a debt and an inevitable situation for that, for it to collapse. The next one we'll go into, the next case study that we'll kind of go into, the genocide in Namibia, German Southwest Africa. So this one is up under the Kaiser Wilhelm, if I'm not mistaken. Um, this was Germany's part in the scramble for Africa, German Southwest Africa or Namibia. I know if I'm not mistaken, the Namibians, they're still trying to get reparations for this situation here. So y'all Google the genocide in Namibia. Not gonna bog it down with the whole detailed story or what have you. The Shark Island concentration camp and the explicit campaign against the Herero and Nama people represent an early example of modern industrialized genocide, right? Okay, the engineering. Let's say, okay, the engineering. The unaliving was ordered by General von Trotta with the explicit aim of ethnic annihilation. Okay, so this is the intent of it, right? We always have to kind of, the first one we examined the scramble for Africa in general, the the intent was resources. You see what I'm saying? This one is more of on an ethnic cleansing type side. Okay, so the confinement in concentration camps and so this was, I would say, the modern, not even modern, but the relatively most recent birth of the concentration camp. You see what I'm saying? Not in Nazi Germany, but in Shark Island up under the Kaiser. The confinement in concentration camps and the ensuing death by starvation and exposure created a pro fractured, agonizing, and highly charged death process. So the whole thing, as far as the concentration camp thing, that would have created a level of trauma for the deceased person. So this would also apply to, let's say, like, your Nazi Germany and all that stuff like that, those particular concentration camps. This is just a different case study. Bioetheric implication: Shark Island being a confined space where the body's physical capacities released the final trauma energy became a supercharged, localized, energetic anchor for the homeless dead. The systematic nature of the unaliving ensured that a high volume of spirit energy was intensely focused on the process of extermination, right? So basically, what it's saying is, those camps, or the Shark Island facility, however it may go, um, that would more than likely contain the trauma of those people. Probably be some, I don't know if it's ever said it was haunted or something like that. And I ain't trying to sound no kind of way when I use terms like haunted, but you kind of, from this subject matter and what I'm talking about, you kind of get what I'm saying. It will have residue of those people because so many people suffered there. Excuse me. The same thing with the slave dungeons in West Africa and everything like that. They will have a similar level of trauma associated with them and stuff like that because people suffered there. Okay, the feedback loop. The land retains a powerful negative charge that can influence subsequent events, leading to a long-term psycho-spiritual fog of depression and despair over the region of the descendants. The perpetrator's legacy is secured through the initial resource gain, but their descendants carry a deep, often unconscious psychic debt. So the psychic debt, even it can even operate on an unconscious level. You see what I'm saying? The debt of doing this. Okay, moving right along to the next case study, modern conflicts. So we're getting into Sudan, Uganda, child soldiers, foreign wars, or whatever. I would say I know a lot of, my people on the continent, the Africans and everything like that on the continent, would probably have a lot more detail to add to this and everything like that. This is just doing kind of a brief skim as far as this is a case study, but I'm pretty sure they could probably speak to this a little bit more in a little bit more detail than I can. But these conflicts represent the ongoing energetic manipulation of trauma for political and economic gain, over often involving the creation of new perpetrators, the engineering child soldiers, the forced use of child soldiers, and the shipment of soldiers to fight wars that the country's native soldiers would not unalive. Right. So this is interesting. All my drill rappers. This is an interesting contrast. All my to my young guys, peace to the guys. This is for my drill rappers out there. Okay, so child soldiers. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so the engineering, child soldiers, the forced use of child soldiers, and the shipment of soldiers to fight wars that the country's native soldiers would not unalive people, is the deliberate creation of a shared trauma bond and a perpetrator class. You're creating a perpetrator class. You see what I'm saying? You're creating a class of people um that do this. You see what I'm saying? The child soldier contrast to drill rappers is very striking. It's a similar theme. The spirit binding, the act of forcing a soldier to kill their own native person or kin, is an intentional, check this out, an intentional ritualistic severing of their communal energetic ties. What? Well, let's say that again. We got to say that again. The use, the act of forcing a soldier to unalive their own native people or kin is an intentional ritual severing of their communal energetic ties. So, so, and I'm gonna just say, I'll just speak like this. If I'm, if I'm, you know, if I'm of this tribe and you of this tribe or what have you, um, for us to, let's say, create certain factions of our tribe within a tribe or whatever, and make a decision to unalive one another, unalive one of our own. You see what I'm saying? I'm using tribe as a blanket term, kind of, but you kind of, if you kind of get what I'm saying, the it's an intentional ritualistic severing of your communal energetic ties. So basically, my young drill rappers, you see what I'm saying? They're separating you from your community. You see what I'm saying? They're allowing you to see another portion of your community as some form of opposition when we all going through the same problems. You feel me? So This is the reason why we have certain conversations like this, because certain things like that come out. You see what I'm saying? A ritualistic severing of their communal energetic ties. This trauma effectively binds the spirit of the child, mercenary, to the trauma of the victim. You see what I'm saying? Preventing a clean energetic separation and ensuring the perpetrator remains energetically subservient to the powers that forced the act. Huh? Energetically subservient to the powers that told you to go get dude. You see what I'm saying? Energetically subservient to whatever made you, on the streets go and do what you did. You see what I'm saying? This is an interesting parallel. Okay, so bioetheric implication, the use of mercenaries and foreign ship soldiers ensure that the home community's bioetheric field is protected from the direct energetic blow of the killing. The use of mercenaries and foreign ship soldiers ensures that the home community's bioetheric field is protected from the direct energetic blow of the unaliving, while the proxy community, the mercenaries community field becomes saturated with a negative charge, making them more pliable and disposable. So, for lack of a better way of saying it, the mercenary is being used as an energetic condom. You see what I'm saying? The mercenary is is the energetic condom. He gets all of the karmic blowback, negative blowback, or whatever. Like, go back and look at the video we did about the bioetheric engineering the homicide. So that the mercenary gets all of that, and it's a temporary buffer for the people who sent the guy. You see what I'm saying? It's a temporary buffer or whatever, because in the end, that's still the person who sent the person, and that's still the person who has the intent behind it, or whatever case may be, and it's still some blowback for that person, but he didn't do the actual act. So this guy gets the majority of it, or whatever, for now. You see what I'm saying? So that's why we having certain conversations like this. So typical situations that we can look at, we get little nuances out of that. Okay, so the feedback loop, the collective trauma of the region, is constantly re-energized. The homeless dead created by these conflicts are now not just victims, but also the product of manipulation, creating layers of energetic debt and perpetual civil strife, which benefits external actors seeking destabilization and resource access. So the people who are out to get you, or whatever case may be, they offset the negative feedback from themselves by getting somebody who looks like you to sever their communal ties and do that. So he's bringing more negative feedback to your ancestral blueprint. Can you dig it? Okay. Yeah, hey, it's funny the stuff that comes out in these conversations. So let's see here. Tanzania and contract their mercenaries. The use of mercenaries to suppress local dissent demonstrates the immediate tactical use of the bioetheric engineering. Engineering by using external mercenaries, the state achieves political goals without directly contaminating its native bioetheric field, the morale and psychic unity of its own people, right? The narrative is important. So if we can lie and say somebody from somewhere else came and did it, or whatever case may be, it helps maintain the narrative and the energetic enrollment and participation of the collective populace and stuff like that. All right. The mercenaries act as an energetic shield and conduit. Bioetheric implication. All right. Let's see. All right. Bioetheric implication. The intentional bloodshed and suppression create a localized area of high intensity trauma induced energy. The goal is to shock the dissenters' collective psyche and ensure the electric soul energy is channeled into fear, which suppresses the will to resist. So it's basically making examples out of people. Okay, so the feedback loop. The action injects a quick, sharp dose of negative energy, fear, or terror into the local dissenting community, strengthening the political power position in the short term, but adding to the national energetic debt and future instability. Because the fear is a short-term thing, because in the background you're still making people do things that they don't want to do. It's still a low coherence energy that you're cultivating, or whatever, within the people that's under your jurisdiction, or whatever. So over time they're going to put their resources and minds together to strike back, as it were. So Let's see. All right, let's see here. Okay. Uh, okay, so another let's see another case study. You see what I'm saying? Let's say if you take, let's say, the Haitian Revolution. You see what I'm saying? Tens of thousands of enslaved people killed, often through extreme violence, approximately 100,000 to 300,000. Homeless dead implications, the massive, violent, and ritualistic, neglected death created an unprecedented accumulation of fragmented spirits. Voodoo became the primary vehicle for both freedom and the ceremonial settling of the volatile spirits, preventing them from destabilizing the newly formed nation. So that's interesting. So the new rituals that they created, um, when they created that system, helped to stabilize all the many people who had been unalived in this whole process and everything like that. Okay, post-event national ethnic results: persistent instability and poverty despite achieving freedom. Haiti struggled with persistent internal conflict, political instability, and extreme poverty. This is esoterically attributed in part to the massive unresolved spiritual trauma and the continued chaotic pull of the unsettled dead. So yeah, so that's an interesting thing. It's basically saying a genocide has a massive negative effect on the ancestral blueprint of a group of people, basically. Let's see here. The Armenian genocide. Okay, that's 1915 to 1923. Approximately 1.5 million Armenians unalived by the Ottoman government, largely through forced marches and starvation. The victims were unalived far from their homes, often not given proper rights, and their bodies were left unburied or lost. This created a vast diaspora of the dead, unable to guide or protect the living community, right? So that's the homeless dead implications or what have you. They were taken away from their homeland or whatever case may be. So they lost, it damaged their connection. You see what I'm saying, with with the living community. Generational grief and political blockade. The Armenian nation, diaspora, and Republic of Armenia is marked by unresolved generational trauma. The inability to bury the dead properly or achieve official recognition of the genocide, preventing the proper elevation of the ancestors, is seen by some as a contributing factor to the enduring political blockage and existing existential threat faced by the nation. Hmm. So as we can see in these various case studies, a lot of times when things like this are initiated, it initiates a snowball effect or what have you. And it takes some time for the people in that particular place to recover. You see what I'm saying? So the Rwandan genocide: approximately 500,000 to 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus killed in 100 days, often by machete and intimate, extremely violent encounters. The scale, speed, and intimacy of the violence led to spiritual shockwave, chaos, and spiritual residue. The sheer mass of violent spirits generated in the geographical small area contributed to a profound, pervasive atmosphere of fear and distrust that persisted for years despite the political stabilization efforts. Okay, so whatever happens to the people in the previous generation or what have you, us being their descendants, we get some of that. You see what I'm saying? Deep social distrust and healing efforts. Post-genocide Rwanda focused intensely on truth and reconciliation. The ongoing work of to spiritually clean the land, an attempt to process the colossal spiritual debt. The Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop has been critical to establishing national stability. Uh, uh, um, let's see. The attempt to process the colossal spiritual debt has been critical to establishing national stability, but the trauma remains deeply embedded in the collective psyche. Okay, let me see. Hmm. Okay, so in individual situations of bombo or homeless or the homeless dead, an individual can enter bombo state homeless dead due to a sudden violent uh, death, lack of proper funeral rites, or an overwhelming negative life path. Okay, so it's interesting. Lack of funeral rites would be a major thing. What we talking about in this genocide type thing or whatever, unmarked graves and things of that nature. Okay, so the suicidal spirit, a person who takes their own life, is often thought to be so fractured and overwhelmed by despair that their spirit is unable to detach cleanly from the physical environment or the site of their unaliving. They become a restless, suffering spirit who may inadvertently feed the despair of the living near them. Hmm. So that's as far as someone who takes their own life or what have you. That's one aspect of entering the or one way you can enter the homeless dead state or whatever, because like we said before, you're bound to a particular trauma as opposed to a person or something like that. um I see a murder victim without rights, a person who is unalived and they don't have any funerary rights, a person violently murdered, particularly one whose remains are lost, hidden, like how they often talk about Jimmy Hoffa and everything like that of the Teamsters, or not given appropriate ancestral rights, becomes trapped by the injustice and sudden shock of their unaliving. Their spirit fragments can often be found haunting the murder site or attached to the perpetrator, fueling obsession, guilt, or repeating cycles of conflict until the injustice is ceremonially addressed and the spirit is lifted. So that's a person without funerary rights. They can become a homeless dead person. Accidental unrecognized corpse, a individual who dies in isolation, i.e., a homeless person or a traveler whose death is not immediately discovered or properly mourned by kin, and without the life force of family, rights, and remembrance, their spirit lacks the energetic signature needed to find the path to the ancestors and may linger near their remains or last known location or whatever. So those are people who are potentially disconnected from their family and stuff like that. So that, I mean, like I said, we may have this, the conversation may be in regarding genocide and all that, but it's interesting the nuances that come up out of some of these conversations. Let's see here. Okay, so the last thing that we'll go into, the difference between binding a spirit to an artifact versus creating a trauma bond via homicide, right? Because we said on the previous video, the Bio-Aetheric engineering of necromancy. When a necromancer does this, he's binding something to an artifact. He might not even been the person that unalived this person or whatever. So there may not even be a trauma bond that exists outside of the ritual that bound that thing or whatever case may be. And he's doing other rituals to offset whatever blowback that comes off it. He got a whole game plan that he's operating off. You just got pissed off with malicious intent and decided to go do something. And now this individual is directly bound to you. You see what I'm saying? So let's get into that. When both involve manipulating a spirit, the intent, method, and resulting dynamic are fundamentally different. All right, binding a spirit to an artifact, intent to secure a spirit in a designated ritual vessel, an artifact for service, protection, or spiritual work. Method involves highly structured, precise, or complex ritual work. The process is about control and contract. Spirit is compensated and given a job, often by binding their essential life force to the artifact, which acts as the new mobile home. Okay, resulting dynamic, a ritual bond based on the master servant relationship, right? Often with the defined rules and obligations. This would be more so a palero or somebody who does necromancy or something like that. This is a structured method. Okay, so not saying, okay, these are mature conversations, so we're outside of the scope of the general understanding of good and evil. We're doing a case study to kind of understand the mechanics of how some of this stuff works. So when things happen to people in our lives or whatever, we'll know how to kind of process that. And even for my young guys, when people pass on and things like that or whatever, and your people can't explain to you what that is or whatever case may be, or how to even deal with that or whatever. Our intent is to kind of give you, I don't know, a different perspective. So maybe you'll be able to process these things a little bit better. Okay, so creating a trauma bond via homicide, right? Intent, not usually ritualistic. It's nothing ritualistic about what you're doing unless you some sort of, you got something else going on. Okay. It is a byproduct of extreme violent death. If utilized by a sorcerer, the intent is to harvest raw chaotic spiritual energy without the structure of a formal binding or what have you. So you're not, this is a person who ain't a sorcerer. This is just a person who's doing it. Method, the act of homicide or extreme violence itself, particularly one driven by intense emotion, rage, terror, which fractures the soul and leaves the fragment charged with the raw emotional energy and tied to the killer or what have you. So that rage or that malicious intent or whatever charges the whole thing, resulting dynamic a spiritual feedback loop trauma bond. The victim's fragmented spirit may unconsciously attach to the killer, either seeking vengeance or simply being drawn to the source of the immense energy that caused the fragmentation and disrupted this person's death process. The killer, in turn, may experience obsessive thoughts, paranoia, mental decline, or a cycle of continuing violence as they are feeding on and being consumed by the unresolved raw spiritual energy they created. In short, binding to an artifact is a controlled, contractual, co-opt co-option of a spirit for an objective. Trauma bond via homicide is an uncontrolled, chaotic, destructive attachment resulting from spiritual fragmentation and emotional shock. So that's kind of the difference between those two things. So we kind of like went through that a little bit. The primary focus of that whole conversation was on the genocide thing, and like I said, a lot of why we even kind of like went into that is because in this next 15 years plus, we might be dealing with a lot of these revolutions and conflicts and things of that all over the planet. That's what the astrology would suggest. You see what I'm saying? Go ask somebody else or look at somebody else's channel who's an astrologer or whatever the case may be, and just review kind of what they talk about. Look at the um, Saturn Pluto conjunction of 2020. Um, go into the Pluto and Aquarius cycle or whatever the case may be, and it's in line with what I'm talking about. I'm gonna always give you some form of receipt, so I ain't just pulling this out of my where. Um, yeah, like so. Yeah, the bioetheric engineering of genocide. So we understand what's happening not just to the living people, but to the people that are going to come after that. And as we can see, um, a major genocide has a potential to set a group of people back for a significant amount of time, not just on a physical level, maybe on a level of the ancestral blueprint. You see what I'm saying? Because the ancestral blueprint is connected with the DNA. So this has been I hope y'all found this to be a fairly interesting piece. Ether Illustrate number 13. Yeah, if you like what you've been hearing, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell in the event that they cheat me in the algorithm or whatever. We underdogs over here. So I appreciate all y'all checking this material out. Ain't no sign of this slowing down or stopping. So appreciate y'all for tuning in. Peace to the true and living. Peace to the God.